we have a quorum. Is there, well, but we have more than a quorum, but is there a need to call roll?
Roll call.
Yeah, Michelle, could you call the roll?
Yes. Director McLaughlin,
Here?
Director Bernstein,
Present.
Director Crawley,
Present.
Director Jones,
Here.
Director Solano.
Here.
All right. Well, as is customary, why don't we salute the flag, say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
Of America.
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it
for
Which
stands,
it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
with
and justice for all.
justice
for all.
for all.
Right, very good. I have to confess to not having a written agenda. There
Oh,
we go.
Jim. So Michelle sent it out on March 4th, the
No, and
special.
she just put it up. Yeah, I knew the topic, but I didn't know if something more detailed had been released or not. So,
You mean the packet?
right.
Yeah, it's up. Yeah. I
Yeah,
got-
staff report in the packet.
Yeah,
I'm
it was
sorry,
sent
Michelle?
to,
We had a staff report in the packet that might be helpful. Do you want me to email it to you?
That'd be great. Are you going to put it up on the screen?
I could do that too if you like.
Yeah, why don't, if you could do that, that would be great. Put it up on the screen, please. Well, is there a particular order in which you want to take the two cities? Yeah, I don't know if that's, yes.
Jim, I'm looking at the packet right now because I have it from when Michelle sent this to us on March 4th. And so the first item, just so you know, is about discussing topics for the upcoming joint meeting with the city of Menlo Park in the
Right.
town of Atherton. But the first, I mean, that's the item, but the first part is about the city, the joint
Yeah,
meeting.
so I split it up in two so that the first part was to discuss the joint meeting topics with the joint
Menlo
meeting
Park.
with Menlo
And
Park, and then the second part
And
of
in
it.
timing, that's the first meeting too. So
Yeah, and the
Menlo
second-
Park is the
And the
first.
second part is for Atherton.
All right, very good.
And can you see the staff report on the?
Yes.
So the first part is, I did a table and a chart, and then how the items, the results of the poll, using the majority votes.
So are those in ranked order, Michelle?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Are those in what?
Yeah, they're ranked. You guys, that was
Yeah.
ranked.
On page 4. Oh, yeah, those, okay.
And remember, this is Director Bernstein had a meeting with Drew Combs, Mayor Combs, and this is what came out of that meeting with a correction to the last item that was Station 1.
All right. Unless someone has another idea, why don't we just take them one by one right from the top? Chuck, I don't know if being the liaison, if you have any particular insights or if you've had preliminary discussions with anyone from Menlo Park.
Well, I certainly did have preliminary discussions with Drew Combs. And they had three things. I'm having trouble. Let me enlarge this a little bit because I'm having trouble seeing it. It's too small for me right now. In any case, they had three things they were really interested in. One was the contract with the city. That's number two. Menlo Park was very interested in that. Although when I asked him what it was that they wanted to discuss, he sort of didn't know what they would discuss. He just said it was a hot topic among the city, and there was some talk that they weren't getting their money's worth and wondered, and so forth. And I said, well, I mean, then, don't buy the services anymore. I didn't know what else to say in terms of that. the, what was this, there, you know, I don't have more than that. He really hadn't done much had much thought about it, but it seemed to me that there were a couple things we were very interested in that we've been talking about. One is some leadership in terms of perhaps for a brief period of time, less than 24 hours, having the city, having the fire district take the lead in providing emergency direction, just since we're on duty 24/7 and who knows where the city will be and where they are and so forth. It seemed that we could work out something where it was clear in advance who was in charge of what right off the bat, and that there wouldn't be a gap in providing leadership and service and so forth. That seemed that was important. We've also, as a board, talked a lot about the LRAD system and what we want to do about taking a leadership role in getting that up and running and operational and so forth.
Well, with regard to, number 2 there, emergency services between the city and the district, we've just commissioned a study of our involvement in this area, the program itself. Are we going to be able to have a discussion about the contract between the district and the city before we get the results of that study?
You're not asking me that question, are you?
Well, I ask it in general. It occurs to me that that we really can't have a substantive conversation until we have completed, our study and done an internal review of the program. And I saw Lynn Bramlett's memo, that she asked be included in the record. And as usual, I think it's very, very insightful. She addresses a number of topics that I look to the study to illuminate, a direction for us. Just what is the best approach to interacting with the city in this regard. I still have the open question about what are the statutory requirements that the city has to follow, and where does that intersect our interests. And so I'm looking to the study. So I throw that out for whatever discussion may.
Let me just provide the chief, probably a better source than I, but a little history just from my time on the board here. And that is Menlo Park had a person in the police department, a police captain, I believe, who was kind of in charge of this. And, he would, I don't know what he was paid, $200,000, $250,000 a year. And he left and the city had nobody. And so they did a contract with the fire district. And I think it was roughly $50,000 or something like that. And it's really more of a compliance thing that the city needed a guy, and now they can say they got a guy and they've got a contract and it's kind of taken care of. But and in a sense, the city really hasn't had much interest in emergency services. They really haven't done anything. There's a plan now, it sits on a shelf and so forth, but there's nothing real. It's just this thing that you were required to have. And so I think they've met their compliance requirements. But in terms, I'm hoping that the study really focuses on real things. That is what we can do to be really prepared for a disaster. And whether the city buys a service from us or whether they don't buy a service from us doesn't really, I'm not even sure what we could discuss. It's kind of not our business in a way. It's nothing, I don't know what they buy. I mean, I think we give away the same thing for free to East Palo Alto that Menlo Park pays us for, but Menlo Park at least can say they have a guy that they pay for. And that's what it does.
Really?
Chief, do you have any
Oh, yeah.
thoughts on this topic?
Oh yeah, so the first part, that's correct. You had a police commander that they lost to the tune of, I want to say $300,000, till they wrapped up. And so they wanted to try and keep that, and that's what they did. Like many of the agencies, Atherton, East Palo Alto both have law enforcement officers or other people within their organization that primarily have the duty of doing kind of what we're doing for Menlo Park. Here's why it's important, which doesn't get said, and I don't think most people understand. If we ever have a real disaster and they have to submit for reimbursement and we have to go through them because we're not the lead agency, they are. If they don't have their training, if they don't have all their compliance pieces done, if they don't have a proper emergency planning manual and so forth, there's a good chance you're going to get rejected for a claim. Many times they don't know how to do a claim. Many times they don't even know how to declare. We saw that in East Palo Alto when Ryan, stood side by side with the city manager during the flooding, and we were successful in not only having an incident we could point to, incident number, but working with Magda, who is the city manager, to get that all done. So there is a purpose, and there is a higher reason for us to have, a hand in helping them. But it was never really about the money. The money was to keep it kind of honest, so to speak, meaning that they would take it seriously. Unfortunately, they do and they don't. There's been turnover, obviously, in the manager's office now for some time. Starla's been in there, but you've also had COVID, which has really blown things up. So, one of the things that Ryan tries to do for them is to make sure they're in compliance with training, make sure they're in compliance with exercise, make sure they're in compliance with some of their manuals that they have to take care of. You don't have to charge them a penny for any of that. When we first scoped this out, it was trying to look at all those different things. And I can tell you repeatedly, I've had meetings with either the police chief or the manager to see what is it they wanted. What is it different that they want to do? I know we keep saying this is our issue. And in one way it is. You can totally waive the fees and say, okay, we're still going to help you out because we would. The difference at East Palo Alto is they hired someone to do it who's on staff, which is good and bad. And in Atherton, they have, I think Ryan says he's on his 5th or 6th police sergeant who's in there who's doing that. Ideally, again, we're all tied together because I think the last part of what you said, Chuck, was pretty appropriate. It's also on the district side of the house that we want to make sure from the professional response that we're all working off the same sheet of music. So I look at that first, and then of course the civilian programs that we share as well. So, there is a lot of importance around it, and that they do the things that they say they should do, and that they do the trainings, and that they do the exercise. The joint exercises are probably the most important thing you can do to see where the weaknesses are and so forth. And we do a fairly good job of that, I think, more at a field level. I'm not worried about the field level. Your active shooter trainings and exercises are always joint, and we do a good job of working with the PD. It's kind of the broader staff that has to be brought in. And then, of course, when you have broader staff that's brought in for an EOC exercise, for example, and their training requirements, how current are they? Did they let staff go? How new is the staff member? Do they even know they're supposed to be doing the training? So there's a lot to it and a fair amount of work that needs to be done. But again, you don't have to charge them for any of it. I think what you're going to find when you get the report back, to your point, Jim, on what the consultants would say is that, there's a lot of things that need to be done across the board with all of these jurisdictions for compliance, but equally for coordination. So, I think it is worthy of at least having a preliminary discussion to see where they're at, because we haven't had that in a long time.
Robert, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah. Two questions, or maybe a couple of questions. If there, I'm trying to get the understanding between, are we actually, is the district making a difference to the city of Menlo Park in their emergency services operation? That's the first thing. And I heard the chief said there are some areas that seem like we are, and there are some areas that, because of changing personnel, they would probably we're probably not, and work still need to be done. Chief mentioned about there are certain, I guess, two areas. There are two, at least one thing I recall was certain things are compliance oriented, and then there was another area you mentioned, Chief, that it sounded like it was kind of almost mandatory. But the compliance as a city, are they complying? Are they fulfilling their obligation that they have to fulfill? And whether the district is really making a difference in that, helping them to fulfill that mission. And the other question is a much broader question. Should have threw it out earlier, that if we are waiting, and let's get back to your question, Jim, if we are waiting, if most of what we see before us, these 7 areas, maybe 6, if the study that we have out there will address these areas, why are we meeting with Menlo Park now or within the near future versus after the study comes in? It seemed like it would make more sense to meet with them afterwards. We have more information to talk to them about, because it seemed like we're going to be, shooting in the dark here, excuse the expression, at this meeting, because, if we can't get a handle on these areas that will build a relationship with them, versus maintaining the status quo. So.
All right.
So I don't know if that's a question or a statement.
You want me to respond to that?
I would love to, Chief, if you can.
So, let me just say this. I've been involved with this since the beginning when we tried to, work to assist them. Like I said, I mean, the compliance issues, that does affect us. If they are non-compliant and the federal government decides, if we have a disaster, that those things are not adequate, then they can deny you funding. And that's the fire district, because we're not the lead agency. Menlo Park is. That goes for Atherton, that goes for East Palo Alto, it goes for all of them, goes for the county, because we're not the lead. So they can hold you up. We're part and parcel to whatever they do when it comes to reimbursement for cost. That's a real issue for us. It's a big issue for us if we ever had a real incident that required reimbursement. So that's probably your biggest one. Now, is this their highest priority? No. I look at their priority lists and they got a lot of things going on. First off, they're short on money, as I think we all realize, right? Because of COVID, many of their staff are working remote. They've had to let people go because of that. They've been in the process of doing a police chief search. There's issues, as you know, when it comes to that. Portions of the community don't feel like maybe they're policed the same way. And I can go on and on and on about different things as I watch their meetings that they're struggling with. So, I think we just got to be, understanding that our priority or our issues may not be theirs. We're lucky we're single focused. They're not. They have a police department, a public works department, a libraries department. They are responsible for roads. So all the different things that the city is responsible for, including electrical utility and so forth, they have to balance all those things in addition to this. That's why we tried to help them. And, again, it's been kind of successful. And I give a lot of that credit to Ryan, where Ryan has dealt with them directly. I remember when Ryan had a desk in the city manager's office, and then it was moved down to the police department's office, to a corner office somewhere where he didn't see anybody. So, it's all a matter of who the manager is and what the priority is at what time and point. And then now, most of how they've been doing their work has been virtual. So they have had a virtual EOC, and Ryan's been involved with that all along. They probably weren't as focused on some of the other more administrative duties like training and exercise, because in real time they were dealing with COVID, and in real time they had a virtual EOC up and running that Ryan attended and actually led many of those meetings that they had, and trying to walk through at least certain aspects of helping them address the pandemic.
One thing, Jim, if I may follow up on
Go ahead, Rob.
what the chief just got to saying, and that's around compliance. If I heard you correctly, you're saying that when a disaster happened, if the fire district doesn't respond, or well, let me see the question is, if the city doesn't come in compliance, and if they try to apply for federal assistance, that they will be denied because they're not in compliance.
Could be. That could happen. That has happened in the past.
So, and insofar as the fire district is concerned, it's more of in the best interest of the fire district and the residents that's in Menlo Park that the city come into compliance on certain issues. Because if we have to move in and start taking care of those issues, if we can, would we be held liable at that point in time?
You shouldn't be, because what will happen is it's ultimately the city and the city manager's responsibility. And so because they don't have their own fire agency, they do delegate aspects or try and use us for different aspects that's within our scope. The operational part for us, I'm not worried about. Again, as you get into kind of the hierarchical training, people knowing what they're supposed to do, that's not normal for most employees working in a city, to do the annual exercise. And like I said, COVID has blown all this stuff up. So, you can't necessarily blame them even for things that are wrong in the environment that we're in, because they've been working off of a different playbook, right? Like I said, they're like all of us are in the middle of a real emergency. For them, it's been fiscal as well. So, and, having employees work virtual, having less employees, dealing with all these things simultaneously. So, we're trying to help them where we can. I don't want to judge them harshly, I guess is the best way to put it. But again, the feds are going to want what the feds want if we have a real disaster, and they're going to want to see certain things. So how forgiving or understanding they can be depends on the person, depends on the situation, depends on what's going on. And, that's what Ryan tries to coach, counsel, and assist them as best he can, understanding that in theory, he doesn't work for them, but he works to help them, I guess is the best way to put it. That contract really, at the end of the day, he's only going to be successful if they make it a priority. And that's been difficult in the environment that we're in. So again, I'm not going to blame them for that. I think that there's a real world situation going on that in normal times would probably be easier to say, well, how come you're not doing that? Right now, I don't think it's going to be as easy to say that.
Rob, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Chief.
This has always been, I think ever since I've been on the board is, in a disaster, it would make sense if these cities would delegate the OES responsibility to us, as Ryan has told us before with the first layer for emergency preparedness or management, that we should be the first layer or our area here, and then the county should take over, and then the state, and then the federal government. It's mind-boggling to me that if there's a major earthquake, the only real leadership role would be San Mateo County with their OES facility. Can we as a fire district don't have that ultimate emergency preparedness responsibility the way the cities and town does? So, Chief, who's in charge if everything goes to hell?
Well, always the local. It's always them.
Local who?
Local jurisdiction having authority, AHJ. That's how it works. It starts, every disaster is local. So the city has it first.
Okay, I understand that. But you've got the city manager in Menlo Park, you've got the city manager in East Palo Alto, and you have the town manager in Atherton, and of course you have the county manager. So who is the one that says barricade Middlefield Road, or that? Who's the person that takes the ultimate responsibility and command for a disaster?
For each jurisdiction, it's the city manager. It depends on what we're talking. So if you say barricade a road, that's probably PD making a field decision. usually the EOC doesn't get up and running within the first 12 hours. So, and I think the scenario you laid out as the county is interesting too, because, the local jurisdictions should be, if they have requests they can't fill, should be going through the county to make requests, and then that goes to the region. Fire does that all the time, right? Because of fire season, we're very practiced because of the USAR team in both state and federal responses, water, urban search and rescue, you name it. We do this, over and over and over again. That's why we're good at it. You have 2 emergency managers working for our jurisdiction. Ryan and Andre serve in that capacity. I don't know of any other agency that has that. I mean, basically we have the brain trust, and then it's up to those jurisdictions whether or not they want to participate or not. So that, really, I think the best term I could use is those guys are really compliance people, right? They try and get all the boxes checked, the training's done, the exercise is done on an annual basis. That's what we can and should provide, so that there's some synergy there, some collaboration. We used to do that, if you remember, down at the warehouse in Facebook Village now, the old USAR warehouse had that, where we did joint training with all those entities, and they also did training on their own there, so they were practiced. But, does it happen that often? No. And so, again, right now, I mentioned Menlo Park, but really I think the same would apply to Atherton and East Palo Alto if you look at where their attention is being paid right now in terms of dealing with the pandemic first.
Virginia, did you have your hand up?
No, I'm just listening. I'm
Okay.
just taking it all in.
Chuck?
It appears there's no centralized command. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like.
Except in the field. Then we know who's running what, right?
Right.
And the first 12 hours is typically easy because you got field commanders. As you know, fire will take on a greater role based upon if it's a fire explosion, if there's medical involved, if there's hazmat involved. So there's a lot of boxes that we check anyway. And then, if there's an investigation, if it's a crime scene, like we have with the aircraft crash, if the FAA, NTSB have to come in, then we hand it off at some point when all those other things are done. The site is safe enough. The victims have been removed, if you can do that, if it's not a coroner's issue. And then you hand off, and that police commander probably takes over as the incident commander. The field part is very structured. It's the EOC long-term duration parts that are a little bit more unwieldy and not familiar for everybody.
Okay. Jim, may I continue with something?
Sure, Rob.
Chief, I don't, if I'm misrepresenting, I'm not, jumping on you as fire chief. I think you should be or your designee should be the centralized pivot point here for these disasters, for the communities that we serve. But since, with the training that your group and yourself have done with these different disasters all over the country, your group would be the best to handle them and be in charge of them. But the state gives that responsibility to the cities and town and the county. So I think we have a really hard pressed situation after 12 hours where, who's going to be in charge? And,
we saw that, Rob. We've seen that in the floods in Menlo Park. One of my worst experiences,
right.
And I won't say what city manager was, but it was a while ago. And the residents themselves were disturbed when portions of the creek, San Francisco Creek, their backyards collapsed into the creek, and no remediation was done, no assistance was given, and no request for federal funds was put in. And so because of that, the residents had to pay for all that themselves. And, it was really kind of a terrible thing, because if you don't ask for federal assistance, and you don't know how to do that, or you don't do that, you won't get any reimbursement for anything. Your people's time, the fire district's time, law enforcement's time. I've seen that on many incidents where, that becomes part of the bigger after action, and you only have so many days to do it. The feds are, they're pretty much on you, and they need you to do that reimbursement request very quickly and have that damage assessment done. And if you don't do it adequately, you're gonna either be out the money, or real people are gonna be paying for their own mitigation measures, which, isn't fair in my mind.
Jim?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you.
Virginia, I think Chuck had his hand up first.
I've spoken. Why don't you, Jim, let Virginia speak first.
Okay, Virginia?
No, I mean, I just wanted to, I know we have a public comment on this. I kind of wanted to get her opinion, but so I can wait until after Chuck's done.
I believe she just submitted written comments. I don't know that she.
Oh, I thought she had her hand up too.
Director McLaughlin, she does have her hand up to provide a public comment
Okay.
when you're ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready now.
Lynn,
Good
you're free
evening,
to-
everyone. This is Lynn Bramlett. And first, Director or Chair McLaughlin, thank you for your compliment about my memo. What I want to say is that this discussion has been very focused on response, and the missing piece is preparedness. So I'm on a trip. I'm in a hotel in Lake Tahoe. I'm not as organized as I normally am, but let me make a few key points related to the discussion. First, to Director Bernstein's earlier point, I'm not at all surprised that Mayor Combs did not know what to ask, because it's a complex subject, and the council members, by and large, have not been kept informed in terms of education. And I'm not trying to suggest anything. They're just not aware of the statutory requirements, best practices, what kind of plans we have, et cetera, because these topics haven't come before them in a systematic way. In fact, the last time I think they had any kind of update whatsoever related to this was in May 2018, when Ryan, along with the then police chief and someone from the USGS, updated them about the Hayward scenario. And then they were informed basically that following a disaster, we leave everything to the fire district. So things have changed quite a bit, maybe even before that date. My impression, based on my studying, my taking classes, my being quite interested in this, is that FEMA now stresses pre-disaster planning and mitigation. And that's the biggest hole here. So if we can, and the only plan that I see in Menlo Park is a very outdated emergency operations plan. I'm not sure it would even be FEMA compliant, because it doesn't follow their requirements to be written in a concise way, to be short, and to take a whole community approach. So a lot needs to be updated. And right now there is a parallel process going on with the update of the county's local hazard mitigation plan. Menlo Park will have an annex. Some of the fire districts have their own annex. And there is apparently a huge amount of money, enormous amount of money available for mitigation. Seawalls, building codes might need to be updated. Menlo Park continues to have projects coming forward in flood zones and also in areas subject to liquefaction following a major earthquake. So to me, the biggest hole is the pre-disaster planning, and our council needs to be better informed as to what Ryan has been providing and what is his role currently. For example, I got a call today from a council member about the renewal of the JPA contract, Menlo Park's member share. The council member wasn't clear who in Menlo Park might be a contact to Ryan, and I know of 3 possible people. And then this contract talks about the Preparedness Survey, which I know is in the works, because I've joined the Emergency Managers Association as a way to try to help connect the dots right now, which I think need connecting between the fire district and Menlo Park towards our common goal. The person wasn't aware about the upcoming RFP and what might be the fire district's role. So, I think there's a lot of clarification that needs happening, starting with better education and, focus more on preparedness and mitigation. So I hope I've been semi-clear. Please bear with me if I haven't been, and thank you for your effort here tonight.
Thank you, Lynn. Chuck?
Yeah, I wanted to come back to, you know, we've talked about this and I think it's a subject worthy of discussion. We don't have the answer. But I think, as Rob was saying, we have talked about, back when I was on the Emergency Preparedness Committee, we were talking about trying to have a clear plan. And this is not to deny Lynn's point about the importance of preparation, which is important. But I still think we need a plan for who's in charge if something happens. And Ryan has been very respectful, and as he should be. And yet, being as respectful as he is, it's hard for him to make progress anywhere. And I think that we could sit down with the council and talk about just making a proposal and saying, look, we know that you're concerned about your authority and not losing authority. Put us in charge for the first 12 hours. If you want it back at any time there, you simply take it back and it's yours. So we haven't taken anything away from them. We just have a backup plan that says for 12 hours, barring anything else, the fire district is in charge of emergency. And we expect that after 12 hours, the jurisdictions would take over their own, you know, emergency or disaster responsibilities. And you know, maybe it's not 12 hours, maybe it's 16, maybe it's 24, but at least that's, seems to me, a worthy subject of discussion. Robert was asking the question, why should we have the meeting? I think there are some things on this list, particularly the purchase of the Station 77 property, that we should talk to the council about right away. I think we've already concluded that the Willow Road property is not appropriate. Before, we're about to spend money to upgrade a property that we don't even own. I think we should get that resolved as soon as we possibly can with the council. So I think a meeting right away is important to at least, and they seem willing now to sell the land. And so it just seems like it's timely.
You know,
Jim, before we get off this topic, I have one more thing to add. I think that would be helpful.
right.
So one of the things that doesn't get discussed, and it's probably because I am so used to it, but the Emergency Services Council for the county actually has, and Jim actually reminded me, I think it was either Rob's, it was a question from Atherton, what is the Emergency Services Council? Well, I thought the city managers were on it. Actually, the elected officials are on it. So it's confusing to me that elected officials in any jurisdiction don't know what's going on when they actually are sitting on Emergency Service Council with the rest of elected officials in the county, and they're paying the county for emergency services. That's one of the reasons that we helped out Menlo Park, is because the county wasn't doing it. I don't know what they're going to do now. I think you're going to see progress now because you have Dan Belleville over there. They've switched from the sheriff's department model that they went to, where you had a commander coming in there every 2 years, and so it was never stable, to now having more of a civilianized emergency manager and someone that does know what he's doing in there. But just so we're clear, the counties charge all the jurisdictions a fee. They're supposed to get X amount of training exercises and service and help on their plans for that. I don't know what they get. I think that's always been lacking to a certain point. And they also pay for the hazmat team and other things out of those funds that they're paying for to the county. So just so you know, when you hear this, that the local jurisdictions don't know, well, by design, they all sit on this Emergency Services Council, and that's an elected official that should be sharing information with their other council members, let alone that the manager, city managers are all, involved with this too and should know themselves. So I know this seems to fall back. It's the district, all this stuff, and we're the ones that are supposed to say all these different things. And I think, Chuck, your point about being respectful, we try to be respectful because, you want voluntary compliance, but you also understand they're up to their eyeballs in other issues. So, what they can and can't do is based upon circumstance sometimes. So
Thanks for that, Chief. Stephen, did you have a comment for us?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I hate to sound like a one-trick pony, but I just do want to remind you all that the agenda and on the topics of this meeting are to discuss the topics, to pick the topics for discussion at your joint session with the City Council. And presumably this board would pick the top 4, as it says in the staff report, and then your staff and kind of city staff would together prepare presentations for you on those items, and then a joint discussion on them would happen between the board and the council. And so I just remind you of that, and you all are discussing a variety of issues, but not picking the topics for the future discussion. So I just mentioned that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Stephen. And Robert, I see your hand, but before I get to you, I would just like to say that I would like us to reach a consensus on, as Stephen points out, what are the top, handful that we want to discuss, and then come to some consensus on what our position is on a particular topic. It doesn't have to be real detailed, but I do think we need to present a consensus. And I will just share with you, I think on this issue of emergency services, we've commissioned a study of our program internally. Menlo Park has just named a new police chief. So, I think a good position for us would be, we've got our study underway. We'll learn what we can from that. The city's got a new police chief. The new police chief should be engaging with our chief to find out, the particulars, the details, where are the deficiencies, where are the strengths, and how do we want to operate? Because there are a lot of, I think there's a whole body of law and regulation that guides a lot of these things, just the roles, responsibilities, relationships, and whatnot that will guide us. And then but I think while we're doing our survey, I think it'd be premature for us to start making decisions about whether or not we want to extend the contract with Menlo Park, and what would that contract look like, and so on and so forth. So those are my thoughts. Robert?
Yes, along those lines, it has occurred to me when I look at on page 3 of the agenda, which is the staff report, on the first page, it appears to me that there are 4 different categories of items, and I grouped them together. And the first 2, if you look at item number 4 and 5, item 4 says shared EOC, and the 5th is shared emergency alerting system. And then I thought that maybe the emergency service contract between the city and the district, I looked at it initially as a separate category, but I think all 3 of them has a lot of overlapping similarities. And then I looked at item number 6, disaster plan with initial 12-hour district leadership as a default. It can be thrown in there too, but I think that's more of a political issue that may take a little bit longer period of time to get to, for a variety of different reasons. And I looked at item number 1, the purchase of the city property by district, and then item number 7, development of district Middlefield Road seminar property. I'm not sure what that really means or allude to, but I thought that was part of Station 1 development. But in any event, actually it can be another category, which is purchase of city property by the district, and then development of the district Middlefield Road property. That's, I'm not sure, the city doesn't own it, but there's a lot of work that has to be done in terms of getting permits and stuff for it. So those are the groupings, and my suggestion would be one of, rather we can prioritize them like you mentioned, and so if anything, those would be my priorities in terms of how I would group the body of conversation, because they can feed off each other in terms of, or lead into each other in terms of conversation.
So Robert, if I
That's it.
understand you, Yeah, these 7 items that are listed, you see 3 or 4 groupings there?
Yes, I do. I can go back over it again if you want me to, but I do see at least 4 different grouping. One is dealing with the body of property. The other one dealing with the emergency, the EOC and emergency service contract, as well as the and possibly disaster plan as a third body. But I looked at that as being more political, and that can be a separate conversation in and of itself. It's just on that one. And then the other 2 groupings, or the grouping, would be the purchase of the city property and the development of the Middlefield Road as a possible third category.
Hey, Jim, for clarity on Middlefield Road, it's an ask by the city. The city wants to use the site for a water supply, a pump facility. That's been their ask for Middlefield.
Okay.
Wait, Jim, can I ask a quick question of Harold? Harold, is that the same thing that we've been looking at for like the last 7 years?
That they had a water report done, and they have a well at the Public Works facility they put in instead of storage, and so they identified another location was Fire Station 1. So they're asking for a pump house there for water supply.
Okay, that's different from that. Remember when Chip made that presentation to the board years ago?
Yeah, it should be the same. I think it's the same thing. They've never kind of gotten off that. Understandably, they have, from their standpoint, they have to have a certain level of compliance with the ability to have emergency water. And so this is what they've chosen. They've chosen wells instead of water storage.
Thank you.
Can I add a precision here, though? Just to be clear, when I wrote number 7, and I'm not disagreeing with the chief that may be of interest to the city, but number 7 was put on here by me because we were talking about the possible training tower and some other developments there, and we were going to need the city's help in getting that through. So this may be a merged discussion of all of this, but this was actually our topic and not the city's topic when I put it on the list.
All right. I think we need to go back to the organization issue. Robert has suggested several categories. I think he's right. I think there's that list of 7 items can be grouped into 3 or 4. I think we would all agree that emergency services is one of the topics that we want to engage in our joint meeting with the city. So I have proposed one approach, that is kind of hold it in abeyance while we do our study and their new chief gets his feet on the ground, and the chief and city manager can identify the issues that they think are important. I think we should be encouraging the city to do that. New police chief should work with the city manager to identify the program, that their roles and responsibilities and how they want to interact with the district. I think it's premature for us to get too far into the weeds on this one because of of our pending study. So I throw that out. I'm happy to hear any discussion. Virginia? Virginia?
Oh, so I guess the question for us to, think about is from this meeting, and actually for the Atherton meeting, what do we want to accomplish, right? I mean, with this other independent review going on, so I'm just throwing that question out. But I mean, there are some issues here that I think that we should continue to move forward with, like the purchase of the property on Chilco, for example.
Right, but isn't that separate and apart from the emergency prep?
Yeah. No, so that's one of the buckets, right? But I mean,
Right.
What do we want to accomplish from these meetings with our counterparts instead of just giving only an update, or maybe the update or whatever is the goal? I mean, I don't know.
Can I give you a little tip on the emergency preparedness side of it? I think
Sure.
Lynn touched on it too. you know, we hired a consultant, or we're going to hire a consultant, right? But just understand that's time. That's their time. People have to answer surveys. Someone's got to be dedicated to that. I mean, you have a lot of different aspects of the city of Menlo Park. You mentioned a new police chief who's not going to know anything. So he's not going to have any ability to tell what the city is doing or not doing. So, you know, that's time. That's time, energy. That's things that maybe you get them to make a commitment to, but just know they really don't even know about it yet. So, you know, to ask them for feedback and to get that in a meaningful way is going to be important. And I think, and that will require people to spend time with the consultant to answer questions that hopefully, you know, they know or don't know. And that's what you're looking for. But, you know, I think just saying that and just having them know that, and maybe having the council commit to that if that's something that they feel like they want to do, or the city manager is going to agree to. Remember, we did this outside of them giving approval. So, you know, it's only going to be as good as how much effort they put into it, and only as meaningful as, you know, the detail. So I just offer that as kind of already what we deal with at times when, you know, they have other agendas and other priorities.
Robert, I'm mute there, Robert.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
There we go.
So I'm gonna throw this out there, folks. Just let's start from somewhere, and then we can hash around at that point. I propose that we group item number 2, emergency service contract between the city and the district, shared EOC, shared emergency alerting system, possibly, but I'm not sure, depending on how people feel about it, the disaster preparedness plan. I would love to see us talk about that right off the bat, because we don't know when a disaster is going to hit. You know, it's better to be on it right now than wait till. But in saying that, I know this, the study that's out there is going to lend itself to address many of those issues, or at least begin to address other questions that we need to ask about those particular areas. And we need a warm-up meeting with the city, I think. And some of these areas, one of them is pretty weighty kind of stuff. And I think our first meeting should not be that weighty. And so I would propose that we lump those 3 items together, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. And then the second priority would be the purchase of the property.
Robert, can I ask that we take these one at a time?
In terms of groupings?
Yeah, just to, you know,
Okay.
check
Yeah.
the temperature and see if
Sure.
we have a consensus.
Sure.
And I like your approach. I think those fit well together, and
Yeah, that makes
lend
sense.
themselves to a separate category. So any
Any
Chuck?
heartburns on those?
Jim, I have a comment.
Yeah, Chuck, please.
Well, I think Robert's right about the idea of grouping them in terms of theme. And I think it would be good to have a discussion. I would just like to point out, though, that as the chief said, some of this is going to take time to develop. But I would say number 6, I would love to see us come away with the council committed to having a default plan for the time being, so we could at least know if something happens 3 to 6 months from now, that we at least have a default for who's in charge during the first 12 hours. So
Well, on that point, to the point, Chief, I would ask you, I mean, this is well embodied in policy, law, practice now. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think one of the good points that was brought up is how you finesse this. And I think, you know, you want it to be aspirational, right? We all want to get it right. So I think if they see it as a non-punitive process with a third party involved that kind of keeps it neutral, and it's a win-win on both sides versus kind of a point, you know, you're not doing this or we're not doing that type of scenario, I think that's probably a better feel for the city. Because I think sometimes it feels like that on different things for them, right? So you gotta be careful.
Because I mean, and my point being, we can talk about district leadership, but these issues, I mean, in an operational sense, are already in place. I don't see any room for negotiation or on that issue.
Yeah, the only thing
I'm
I would
wrong.
say is their cooperation to do a study. You know what I mean? I think that how you sell that, look, you're going to get what you're going to get if people come and ask questions. And so hopefully it's not seen as a negative, right? It's seen as a positive. I would hope, you know.
I'm not sure, Jim, when you say it's in place, what's in place?
You know, the structure, the command structure is in place now. I mean, the command structure is defined in both state and federal law, and our policies reflect those statutes.
That the city manager, for example, is in charge, but there's nobody home in an emergency.
Well, I think that's a separate issue.
Well, it's not for the people who live here.
I mean, it's a separate issue in the sense that, you know, there is a structure, a defined structure now. And I think the separate question for me becomes, you know, is it functioning properly? And, you know, that's what I'm looking to the study for. You know, is it functioning properly? Where are the deficiencies? You know, what needs to be corrected?
But I don't think that you're talking about the study of that we're going to do on emergency services. That's
Yes.
not going to address what the city does. The city of Menlo Park. I mean,
Well,
Jim,
yes.
let me ask Chief a question. Chief, if we take on this within the first 12 hours, the district take on stuff in the first 12 hours, how much liability we take on at that point in time?
Well, it depends on, you know, it depends on what you do, but I mean, you know, in the what's called the emergent disaster, I mean, we're pretty well covered in there. You know, I mean, people could die and you could be sued and people could question your actions, but you know, it's really being run from the field, right? So it's the incident commanders that are making decisions. And I think there's a lot of latitude given to that. I think where it becomes less clear is you end up with a multi-day, multi-week incident, and you know, the right levers don't get pulled, things aren't in place, it kind of falters. Like I said, a declaration isn't done, people lose out. I mean, there's a lot of ways for these things to go wrong beyond the initial emergent problem, right? And you know, certainly reimbursement's always one of them, but equally, you know, how can you even stand up an EOC? You know, can you staff it every day? Can you still run your organization doing it? You know, when San Bruno had the plane crash, they realized they have such a small staff, they started to ask for help in there, you know, literally by day 2 or 3 because they couldn't keep it going. So everybody had to help them as an example.
But Harold, I mean, the ICS model is in place now, correct?
Correct. Oh yeah.
Right.
You're right in everything you said, Jim, and that if we get a disaster today, it'll get handled. Now, for the long term, there's different things that need to happen.
Right. And then, you know, I think a lot of what's at issue here is the preparedness aspect, is the preparedness component. And again, I don't think we're going to be able to have a meaningful conversation or discussion on these things until we've done our internal review.
Yeah, I think getting them to agree to that is probably a good conversation, right? Because again, they don't want to see it as an adversarial issue or something that would maybe expose an embarrassment to them. I think you got to be careful with that part of it.
Virginia?
Yeah, so getting back to the actual issue of what do we want to talk about? You know, what do we want on our list? I mean, the fact that we're having this discussion, we probably at least want to have it on our list to bring forward when we meet with the city, Menlo Park.
Yes.
So I mean, so we stick to what we want to keep on there. That seems to be one of the things that we need to talk about.
So is it fair to say we have a consensus around this issue, that emergency services and the ancillary items that you know Robert identified constitute a single topic for our discussions with the city? Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, I do too. So Robert, what was one of the other groupings that you identified?
The other grouping had to do with the purchase of the property by the district and development of the Middlefield Road property.
Okay. Again, I think this is something, we should discuss just so that we have, a shared understanding of the issue and a consensus around what the district position is. So I'll take, 77, I think is at issue. Chief, I would ask, can you bring us up to date on any discussions on this issue, or kind of give us a snapshot of where we're at relative to 77?
Yeah, I mean, real quick, I think that, the city, as you know, on the Willow Road property, and I think even Director Bernstein raised a concern on ownership of some of the easements, whether those apply to the piece of land behind it. They may or may not on the Gateway project that's there, or one of the projects that's there, or the housing project. But, the Willow Road property, as you know, they decided they were going to buy that, and they did. And so that's tied up now for at least three years with a side agreement with the housing authority. With COVID, I don't know what's going on. I know they put some screening on the fence and so forth. On the Fire Station 77, we got a new lease. I actually framed the check, so I have that here, so we know it was all paid off, because remember, that was never fully executed in the past. And we've had that property appraised 4 times. And 4 times we have not been successful in getting them to sell it to us. So at this point, the Willow Road property, I think, is in question. And then equally, the disposition, if you want to purchase the Station 77 property, is certainly something we could do, but you do have a now 53 and change year lease for use at $1 a year. So, again, that's kind of where you are in the aspect of, property and what we're able to do with it currently.
Is there, just a moment, Virginia, and I'll get to it. Is there a last word on the Station 77 property? I mean, have we made a
Do they
formal
want to
proposal?
sell it?
Yes.
They did not want to enter into this discussion, I think, last time, as they were, their primary goal, last time we had this discussion, I had this with the city manager, was working through their budget shortfall. And they were in the middle of dealing with concession discussions with their unions, and therefore did not really have time for this. And I think took a little exception to me saying, let us know, because we don't want to spend money on another appraisal if you're not going to be serious about doing it, because we've done the appraisal 4 times. So, I think I'm not sure why that was offensive, but I don't think we want to spend money if it's not going to be a priority. I really think, and I'm just going to be truly honest here, is that if there's no desire to sell the property, or if the board just says, we're good with where we are, we have an executed lease, everything's legit now, then you move on for now. I mean, even the Willow Road property, without the Facebook campus and the traffic, returning, and the easement questions that have come up, and the 3-year agreement with the housing authority to build apartments, and that's where they're going to do the lay down for their equipment. I mean, all this stuff is kind of tied up. So how much time do you want to spend, right?
I agree.
Yeah, Virginia?
Yeah, so I think that the last time we left it as a board, if I remember correctly, is that we weren't even gonna, the Willow Road property isn't even an issue for us at this point. If we're gonna do anything, what are we gonna discuss? Which property? I think it'd be the one on Chilco, which we've been trying to purchase for God since I've been on this board practically. But again, taking into account this 50+ year lease, I mean, I think the chief has a good point. So, I actually put that down as one of the priorities, but I'm rethinking, is that something that we should even be discussing? I mean, we haven't even discussed how we want to move forward with the Willow Road property after we've already made a decision. So, I mean, maybe the property issue isn't even an issue. I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking that through still.
Okay,
And if,
We,
and if property is an issue, I would only focus on Station 77.
okay.
right.
Robert?
No, I was just wondering.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I meant
clarify.
Rob. I meant,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, I'll come back to you. I meant Rob.
No worries.
Thanks, Jim. I think it's of, of our highest priority to get that purchased, as Chuck has said, and the chief has said. Was it 4 times, chief, we've been trying to purchase this parcel? To, get them to, say where they're coming from. Are they going to sell this thing to us? Because, if we're going to invest any more money into 77, either with an expansion, with the Chico house, I mean, we need to own that parcel. And of all these things here, I'm saying the purchase of the property next on where Station 77 is, and number 2, the emergency services contract between the city and the district, the LRAD system, I think that still needs to be coordinated with the local jurisdictions and the county, but I'm in favor of having that as a discussion item also. So those top 3 are my top 3. And it may take us 2 hours to go through all of them, but those are probably the main things that I'm looking at right there. And as Robert said, that emergency services contract and basically emergency services aspect is a lot of it falls into place relative to what Robert said too. So, Jim, I'm looking at the top 3 and, number 1 and number 2, are, as far as I'm concerned, that can take 2 hours, man. So that's where I'm at.
I
Thank you.
agree.
And Rob, just so you know, here's I framed the check we sent them for 55 years, and we have a fully executed agreement this time. So that was the problem last time, is they were asking us for the executed agreement. We found out that under Rick Ty and Bill McClure, it never happened.
Right.
So there was some concern.
Yeah.
So you got a fully legit, signed off legal agreement, and you got the check to prove it. And so it is a little bit different. And we do own the Choco property next door. So if you wanted to build a new station there, you have the ability to build a 3-bay, 2-story facility. That gives us the room necessary to do it if at any point we're able to buy it. In the meantime, we're getting bids, as you know, for the addition of 2 bedrooms or change of 1 bedroom to 2 bedrooms and an expansion of the shop to house the largest ladder truck. So we're, somewhat piecemeal, but, nevertheless, it takes in all the current necessity for the facility.
Oh, Chief, don't get me wrong. Getting that, the way you got that lease finally, okay, was a great task. I appreciate that.
10 years.
Robert?
Yes. I think that I just wanted to kind of bring this, see if we can kind of bring some of this to a conclusion in terms of listing our priorities. But in terms of talking about just the property over at Choco, I think 55 years at $1 a year, versus buying it for $7-8 million, that particular property may not go that much, but let's say, for example, just go 5 million. I think over the 55 years, even if we put another 4 million in it, the numbers in itself, the cost of itself, and the use that we get out of it outweigh, even if we don't acquire it right now, to rent it out for $1 a year, for $55. I mean, the economics just seem to make a lot of sense. I mean, if they agree to sell it to us now, then that's even better. But that to me, I don't see there's been hesitation on it over these years. Virginia said it's been that way for the last 10 years, and there seemed like there's still some hesitation. So all the brain matter in terms of conversation at this first meeting, I wouldn't even go down that road. I think those are backdoor channels that will be obvious over next year or so, whether there's interest, and maybe they might change their mind. But I think I wouldn't want to spend 2 hours talking to them about that. We got to build this goodwill with the city folks right now, and finding those areas where there's softness in the conversation that may be able to progress is what I'm looking for to try to achieve.
Okay, Virginia, and then Chuck.
Yeah, just getting back to whether or not this should be on our agenda. I mean, the fact that we're having this discussion, I think maybe it should be on the agenda. We can punt it at the meeting. But whether or not it should be on the agenda from our end, I mean, based on what I'm seeing, it should probably be on there. Getting back to the issue of what we want on the agenda.
Okay, Chuck.
When I spoke to Drew indicated to me that it was his belief that the city council was ready to sell it to us. And they were not happy about hearing about how it took 10 years to do it. They were not happy about Peter Carpenter's speech at the groundbreaking of Station 6, that it was going, that it had taken twice as long to build the station than it did the house next door. So they were tired of being insulted by the fire district, and they felt. And Drew told me if we got off that soapbox, that the deal would go through.
Okay, I'm not sure we have a consensus here on this particular item. If I think it would be premature to start discussing details. I mean, if the city expressed a willingness to sell it to us, then I think we go back and sharpen our pencils and decide if that's something we want to do, and have that discussion. So if it were to stay on the agenda, perhaps, again, I'd like to hear from all of you. What would the district position be? Just express an interest without going any further than that.
Jim, let me give you one more fact on this. So I know Director Jones mentioned like 7 million. Actually, the last time that we did an appraisal on this, it was about $1 million. So I think we started, it was $500,000. So, take that over time from, things were really escalating at the time. I don't know that the market is escalating. It is raw land. That's how we would buy it. We can't be expected to repurchase our own buildings. We invested in that we do own. So it's just the cost of the land. And last time we did an estimate, it was about $1 million.
Okay, Robert.
Last word on this. I think creating this waterfall in terms of prioritize groupings and priority makes a lot of sense because I guess we got to figure out how long is this meeting going to be. If we got a 5-hour meeting ahead of us, we might be able to get to all this, but I think there's going to be some robust conversation that's going on. So I think if we stick with the waterfall approach in terms of with the priority of conversation, leave it on the list, leave everything on the list as a flashpoint, but yet still with the idea, understanding that if we don't get to it, at least they would know to any depth that we want to get into talking about it, that's on our mind, and that's something we would like to approach. So
Okay.
those low-hanging or conversations like Choco or purchase of the property, if it's a priority for it, then let's move it up to and hammer that away. But I think we need a waterfall these items.
I
That's what
appreciate
I'm
that
saying.
point, but when we do have the discussion, I think there should be a broad consensus on a particular topic, like the purchase of the Station 77 property. I think we should be in a position of saying, if you're interested in selling it, we're interested in entering a discussion with you on that topic.
Yeah.
Something short of saying,
Right.
yes, we're ready to write the check.
Right.
And no, we're not interested at all. But if, if we have a consensus around that, I think, that I think we need to be prepared to speak with one voice, or as close as possible. Virginia?
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
6
I mean,
hours later.
I agree, Jim, but I also think that we don't have to go that far into saying, oh, yeah, we want to buy it or we don't want to buy it. I mean, we can just say if there is a desire to possibly sell this to the fire district after 9 years or 8 years, then we can say, great, let's we
Set up another
have to
meeting. Right.
we have to convene as a board to have a more thorough discussion. I agree.
All right.
I mean, but I don't think we have to commit to anything, as you said, but we do need to do it. Just, I mean, we can't, we have to go through the different steps again. We have to make sure that they're serious. I mean, 4 appraisals is ridiculous, but that's what we've had to do. So we can just say, yeah, so let's take it back to the board and we'll have our own discussion about that. And probably it would be in closed session because it could be potentially a property acquisition.
So one more factoid on 77, even if we were to buy that Willow Road piece of property, you would still need that facility because you have fleet services, water rescue, you have a rail line going through there that's being discussed to be reopened. There's actually a siding that was put in for us because of that. And that facility is right between the M2 or the industrial and the residential. So it always was in a fairly good spot that it could go left or right and, make a right turn, you're in the residential, make a left turn, you're in the commercial, with a pretty straight shot out to Bayfront and, and a pretty straight shot out to Willow, minus some of the traffic calming stuff that's been put in. So, again, regardless, 77 would be a facility you couldn't get rid of because you'd have no other place to put your fleet services, your water rescue capabilities and so forth. Even if you tried to move those at headquarters, you'd move them somewhat further away and it would create different problems. So, just
Well,
know
my
you
understanding
needed
was
that
that,
property.
oh, sorry, my understanding was that the Willow Road property wasn't even an issue at this point.
Right, but remember we said it would be a fire station.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is that they bought it right before the pandemic.
That's
And
correct.
then they wanted to sell it to us. And we talked about this. So, I mean, before we even go there, I think the only thing that we need to focus on right now is Station 77. If we were to look at property acquisition.
Agreed.
All right. So as I hear it, I think there's a broad consensus around, if you're interested in selling it, we're interested in having the conversation.
Yes, that's the way I think we should approach it, Jim.
Right.
No commitments.
Yeah, and that'll keep it pretty short.
I agree.
Yeah.
But for me, that would be the only property. So that's something that we would want to talk about and have on the agenda on our end.
Okay.
Can I just ask, though, I'm
Sure.
not clear. I'm not clear why we wouldn't want, I mean, I don't want to discuss the merits of it right now, but why do we want to be so coy about this? I guess I don't understand. We want to buy Station 77 property. I mean, I don't see that there's any other choice. Why do we want to play cutesy about it?
I don't think we are playing cutesy. I just think that if there's interest in selling, we as a board have to come back and
But why don't we
let's have
just
a
say,
discussion.
we want to buy it. Will you sell it?
I don't know. I mean, I would like to buy it, but I'm not going to speak for Jim or anyone else
No, but
on this board or Robert or you. I mean, I know where you are. I mean, I agree, but I don't want to make a deal at an agenda setting or at a joint meeting until we, as a board.
Of course not.
That's all I'm saying, Chuck.
But this idea, if they have to be interested first, why can't we just say, we'd like to buy it? And if you're interested, we'd like to talk to you, talk to you about a deal. And all these deals, you never get you make a deal typically for the appraised value and you don't get the appraisal. That's not part of the deal. The deal is that you're going to sell it for the appraised value. You put a little process in. If you don't agree with appraisal, you go get another appraisal, and then the 2 appraisers hire a 3rd appraiser, and there's a whole little rigmarole that you go through, and you come up with a price, and that's how it works. But why we would pretend that we were only partially interested, I think is just isn't true.
Well, I think, Chuck, as I understand it, there's a feeling that we've been left at the altar 2 or 3 times.
Well,
I would, yeah,
I think
3
we've done our own insulting. I think we've done our own insulting there. And I think from the other side was that we insulted our bride on the way to the altar. And
That's why I think, Director, what you brought up is every other time the city has directed us to get an appraisal, I think the way you just said it is probably the best way to do it, right? So rather than the district do all this legwork on the front end, it just become a normal aspect if they're willing to sell it versus that we spend money and then get rejected. You know what I mean? That's kind of the history,
That's
sadly.
correct.
But I think, instead of that, if they're willing to start to move forward to a deal, as you just alluded to, and again, I'm no real estate agent, but that would make more sense than come back to us with the appraisal and then we'll make a decision. And the decision was no. Well, that doesn't look good, right? So I think just let a normal process go through. I think what you just said makes a lot of sense.
They want to dance, then you ask them to dance. They don't want to dance, okay.
Okay, how much you want for it?
Right.
Right. Robert, I think you had identified a third category here.
Yeah, the third category, let's see, the third category, actually there was 4, but one of the category was the homeless encampment. That was a kind of a grouping by itself. And then yeah, so that. And
So,
then the last one we kind of talked about.
On the homeless encampment, what can we expect in this arena? I mean, do we have a list of, do we have an ask here? Or is the ball in the city's court and we live with what they do or don't do on this issue? So Harold, I'm addressing that to you. You're unmute, Harold. You're muted.
Sorry, not an easy question, because these things move, and then the city and the district are all parties to something that's really somewhat uncontrollable, depending upon where it is. Caltrans right away, different jurisdictions have authority. I mean, to give you a sense of it, we had a shooting out there today at one of the ones, the Triangle had a shooting, and Caltrans was out there a week ago cleaning part of it out. So, it's, I think, probably the best, if you're going to take the 40,000 foot approach, is to have a more regional, like task force like the city has, and then also include other players like the city of East Palo Alto, because these folks are moving between communities. And I mean, ultimately the goal is to try and.
I hate to interrupt you, Harold. I hate to interrupt you, Chief, but I mean, do we have a list of items that we would like to see the city do, to improve the safety of our employees?
Yeah. And we've given those to the city. The city's been working, and we've been working with different nonprofits to get people out of these places, and then Caltrans to abate hazards, depending upon what it is. And then the city to have their police department patrol where able and so forth, to deal with this. And I would just say there's a task force, so just more or less to keep the task force process in place. Director Jones was on that last year, so there was an elected representative from the district. I was on it. I think to keep that task force going makes a lot of sense. I think that's probably your ask, is keep the task force going, so the discussions go on there.
Okay. Virginia?
Yeah, so I do think this should be on the agenda, and I think that we should get an update from the task force from their perspective. I mean, we've heard it from our end, but the fact that that area seems to continue to be problematic, I would like an update on what the city is doing or not doing, or working or collaborating with other agencies, and that's what I would like to hear from them.
All right. Chuck?
Respectfully, Virginia, and I understand this. What we'd like to do maybe is, hold their feet to the fire or whatever. But it seems to me I don't think that's helpful for what we want to get happening with the city of Menlo Park. The homeless are a political problem. It's a pain in the butt. It's something that they can't do anything about, we can't do anything about. And in a sense, I'm concerned that by asking them for an update and they're having to tell us that nothing's happening, it's just going to embarrass them. And I just
Okay.
think strategically, it's not that it's not important, but I think we can do it privately without embarrassing them publicly about something that they're not going to do anything about. And I mean,
Okay, I mean, that's fair, Chuck. That's fair.
I think,
But
I think if you ask them
Yeah.
to continue the task force, that right there is kind of the, you know, as long as there's still that mechanism, that's, to your point, Director, that's kind of done. I wouldn't say behind the scenes, but in a place where it's more results oriented and it's not necessarily part of a board or council meeting.
Robert?
So I sat on the committee with the chief most of last year, and there are people on that committee that are movers and shakers in their areas of expertise, from the state level, from Caltrans, I mean, from a variety of different county, as well as the city. I think if anything, Chief, I don't know if they have called another meeting or not, but I think that task force that we put together was making a difference, not only for the humanity, for the homeless folks that are out there, but also looking at ways to secure. And I think the chief have given a report at a last board meeting about what they have actually done and what they're anticipating to do more to do. I think is just being able to have this group, keeping this group together. And I'm sure, according to the last year mayor, I haven't talked to this year mayor, Chuck did probably have, but that, as far as I understand it, that's a committee, a group of folks that they are wanting to keep in place till a real solution is made and found for the homeless encampment. Because there's a lot of folks out there, and they can spill over into anybody's neighborhood at any given time if the circumstance is right. So I think there's a genuineness that I felt that they're about having that committee, that group going, and that the city will be the spearhead of it. So what they have done lately, I haven't went to a meeting last
They haven't
month.
had one, Robert. So it's 100% everything you're saying.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of, hey, ask them, hey, is the homeless encampment committee going to be pulled together, and what can we do to help? That's all.
Yeah, so we're in March, I think, continuing that, you know, making sure, you know, you designate who the liaison is, you know, asking to have the meetings. I mean, I'm sure today's shooting incident, you know, and the Caltrans cleanup is all, you know, relevant information that the group should be meeting again and discussing, you know, what else can we be doing, or what should we be doing to focus on certain aspects, because it has been fairly successful. I mean, I understand, Director Bernstein, what you're saying, and you don't want to beat them up, but actually that was a place where solutions were created and the right people were applied to the task and things got done.
Right, so I hear that a consensus of we find value in the task force and we encourage the city to continue to operate it, and
Right.
and we will be an active participant.
Yeah, it's March. We haven't met all year and we need to meet.
Okay,
So that's going on the agenda from our end, right, Jim?
yes.
Thank
You know,
It's
you.
already on.
I don't hear any real support for the developing the seminary property, that, you know, perhaps it's premature. Rob?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a comment on the homelessness situation. Chief, were we asked to sit on that committee?
We were, yeah. Actually, initially we were one of the first ones, because we've been providing all the documentation. It gets a little harder when it comes to law enforcement, as you can imagine, because there's sensitivities to that between CHP and Menlo PD, and then the nonprofit third-party groups that provide assistance. Equally, I think they don't necessarily always want to lay all their cards on the table. But what we did identify was that there were 3 different groups helping. They didn't know about that. So, I mean, just getting that kind of straightened out, the synergy of everybody pulling the same direction was very helpful once it all happened.
Yeah, so we were asked to participate then.
Yeah, we were.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Jim.
All right. I think,
Jim, let me just, I'm not sure
Sure.
about the conclusion. I agree with what was just said about, um, with, continuing these meetings and so forth. But I'm not sure that means putting it on the agenda for discussion. Once somebody says that, what else is there to discuss?
I think that's enough.
Okay.
Again, we're paying attention to the issue. It is important to us. It continues to be pose operational challenges for us, and
And that we support what they're doing.
we support what they're doing, and we've again find value in the task force, and we'll continue to support it. Again, I think it becomes a pretty that becomes pretty brief, I think.
Okay, well, it's more of an announcement in a way, or an update or something, but in any case,
Sure.
okay, I just wanted to be
Yeah,
sure.
I think an expression of willingness and
Yeah, I would say
acknowledgement that it continues to
endorsement.
be a problem.
An endorsement of it.
An endorsement, sure,
Okay.
and an acknowledgement that it continues to be an issue or problem for us. I think, like I said, I would suggest that we let the development of the Middlefield Road Seminary property fall off. I think it's premature. There's nothing imminent. There's nothing in the planning phase or stage. If they want to bring something forward on this, on the water pumping station issue, they certainly, they can certainly bring that up with us. But if, that's not our issue, and if our issue is a training tower or other development there, I think we're far enough away from that I think it'd be premature and not have a lot of value to discuss it at this juncture. That's me. What say the rest of you?
Sounds good to me, Jim.
Okay. All right. Hey, I think we have a consensus around that, so we'll let that fall off.
We got a consensus of two. I didn't hear nobody
No, I saw
else.
Rob gave us a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. Nodded his head.
I think we've covered most of that list with Menlo Park. Unless anyone wants to continue, I think we can move on to Atherton. Okay.
Yeah.
So Virginia, you've been the liaison with Atherton. I know you've met with the latest council member, and where do you think we're at on this?
I think that what we need, so what I reported back at our last meeting is kind of pretty much in today's staff report. And since then I've been at their study session, which I think it was last week, something like that. And basically, I wanted to make sure that for our group, for the board, our board, that we were at least okay with some of the things that you and I, Jim, had talked to the council member liaisons, and maybe add anything if we wanted to talk about anything else. Or
Michelle, could you scroll down, please?
yeah, sorry, I'm trying to pull it up on my phone.
There we go. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I mean, the only real solid update is that the council, I think George and Harold are working to set a date, which now will probably be in early April, I think late.
And
I don't think.
George had suggested the 12th. I'm going to check my email and confirm that. But
Okay.
yeah, he had said, I told him that March was probably out of the question, given everything going on with Menlo and so forth. And then he suggested, I believe, the 12th. But I'll check that email and get back to you.
Okay.
Of course, we got the poll for that.
Okay, so in any case, this is the list that that we came up with based on the Atherton list, and Jim and I, talking with or being in this meeting. So some of the things that we're able to do is from the Menlo Park Fire Protection District. These are the things that I think that the council would want to, based on the meeting. But again, if there's any additional topic that y'all want to put on here, or if you want to take some of these off, let's have that discussion. But the main thing is, these are the things that we came up with as possible discussion items, and maybe we just need to refine it more so that when we go to the joint meeting, we have a more refined agenda, or not. Does that make sense, Jim?
Sure. You know, maybe we can move through this list efficiently.
Yeah, so basically the 6 topics were just the fire station updates, the Atherton Council Chambers, how it might double as an EOC, if at all. The community preparedness update, which would include possibly even like the Zone Haven update or the Zone Haven system. I think that they're very interested in that, and maybe that could be a bridge between tracking responses by stations if we even do that. But the main thing is, I think, is the community preparedness piece. And Harold, if we can get the developer of Zone Haven to do a presentation, that might be really great. Smoke alerts, just because we're dealing with different kinds of smoke, whether it's a prescribed burning or fire or air pollution, what kind of smoke alerts are there? I mean, I know that that's of particular interest to Councilwoman Hawkins Manuelian. And I think Council Member DeGoya was also interested in that. And, just an update on the SOC, Harold, based on, what we know right now to the full council, especially since Councilwoman Hawkins Manuelian is new. So those were the 6 things that, that Jim and I discussed that would be good based on their list. So if we have a different list, this is the time, or different topics that we want to add, this is the time to express express ourselves on adding those topics.
Chuck?
It strikes me that there's 2 things. One is that as Robert kind of grouped the emergency services ideas, that this is something that we should do with Atherton also, that it has relevance to Atherton as well as Menlo Park. And I thought that the way that was organized was helpful and good. And it kind of relates to this a little bit. But there's some things that my other point was that there are some things here that we don't need to be at. I mean, we already heard a Zone Haven thing. Why do we want to sit while they listen to Zone Haven? I mean, they can have a Zone Haven report at any time. Similarly, I mean, it seems to me, Virginia, you could give them an update on the station plans. I mean, this is.
I did, Chuck.
Well, in other words, this is not a conversation or a discussion. It's simply a presentation. And that's really not, there's no reason for a joint meeting to do that. We ought to have really a joint meeting where there's something to discuss back and forth.
Well, I even think oh, sorry, Jim.
Chuck, I appreciate your point, but I think, we're on the heels of the detachment issue. And I saw this as an opportunity, again, to, highlight, the many things that we do, for the town. Even Zone Haven, I think you could say, the value in having that presentation would be, information that we provide would help form, the message that's pushed out through the Zone Haven system. So again, I like the town to see, yes, it's a private developer that developed a software program, but the information that drives a program like that comes from the public safety agencies that are involved in an effort and or in a disaster, and even the things about the updates on the facilities and all that. I don't think we should miss any opportunity, again, to blow our own horn, to and I don't want to express it that way, to just highlight the many things that we do that benefit the town, just as a reminder of, hey, we're here, this is what we're doing, we're here for you, we're your fire department with Menlo Park Fire, so on and so forth. So those are my thoughts. Virginia?
Jim, can I add on to that? Yeah, so in the past, we have given updates that were relevant, and these were things that they had suggested. I agree with Jim that this is a good time for us to give an update on what we've accomplished, the things that we're working on. I don't think that you always have to have a meeting just to, hash out something. I think right now on the heels of, of, I don't even want to say the detachment issue as much, but the fact that it's even out there still, I think the Atherton residents, whom we also represent, I mean, we were elected by them, deserve to know what's happening, and this is our opportunity to do that.
Jim?
I mean,
Robert?
the approach between Atherton and Menlo Park, I think, are going to be very, very different, don't you think, Jim?
Yeah, I think different issues.
Yeah.
Robert?
I think three things, if I may. I'm gonna try to get them all lumped into everything, three things. I think that we need to be consistent in approach to every city. So with that said, yeah, I don't mind if we just want to sit down and have tea together and talk about certain things, or I think, Jim, you're right. We need to kind of accentuate or talk about, whatever we can about the good things and the collaborative things we are actually doing, not only for Atherton, but for all the cities. But the things that the first item that's on that our agenda for Atherton that I saw was discuss a methodology to best establish common ground. So I'm hoping that we can get to that as part of an initial conversation, because I really like to know what that methodology is, and what approach we would take to try to find whatever that common ground. Because with that said, that the things that have happened, talked about over the last couple of years since I've been on a board about with Atherton, that there are some special projects that they have that they would like the district to either participate in or to fund, one or two. So if that's a common ground, then we need to kind of call that for what it is, and let's look at those common ground. But I think the methodology would kind of get us dancing at this point in time. There's two questions that really kind of send alarm bells up, my antennas up. And the first one have to do with item number two. It says the fire district report on plans for upgrade to station 1, 3, 5, 6, 5, and 6. It left out station 2. It left out also station 77, because station 6 is already done. As far as I know, I mean, it's already done. I don't know what kind of updates need to happen, but that's what they want to take place. So I think we need to be consistent in that regard. And what is the real need to report out to Atherton on these issues? What common ground is there for that? So that's the thing. That's the first antenna that goes up for me. And the second item has to do is item number 7. Does the fire district now track response statistic on a jurisdictional basis? If so, please provide those statistics for Atherton. So I assume that they want to know about what goes on in East Palo Alto or Bellhaven area. That part of some understanding that they want. Because I'm having a hard time to understand why would they would need that level of statistics on the different jurisdictions in terms of calls. I assume stats on that. It's just a kind of alarm. I mean, yeah, it may be all innocent, but I'm just asking why would they need that level of statistics. And the last part that I know they want to discuss. The rail crossing challenge in Atherton. What does that have to do with the city? Is that with the fire district? Is that part of that common ground? Number 6, discuss water flow system for fighting fires in Atherton. Is that part of that common ground that we need to look at in terms of facilitation or participation in? So all those, I mean, those things require dollars and cents. And the last thing I had to discuss community education on emergency communication system. So some of these things require dollars and cents. If it is, then that's a level of conversation that we need to talk about. And I guess the only way we could do that is to have that conversation. So those are the things that I'm concerned about, tracking the response by station area, and this whole thing, and they want to know about the SOC in terms of
Robert,
update.
Robert, I probably didn't make myself clear. So actually the bottom part, the bottom 6 items were the ones that we agreed on that might go onto the agenda. The other 8 were, that's the major set. And then the other 6 that the liaisons agreed that could possibly be agenda items are the ones that we're talking about. So some of the ones that you talked about that you're concerned about wouldn't necessarily, we agreed would not be on the joint meeting agenda. So it's
When you
just
say
those.
when you say not necessarily, that means
They, well, we're
probability
not
might be.
putting it on there. So the bottom 6 are the things that we agreed on.
Jim,
Rob?
Virginia, are you finished?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jim, there wasn't anything that was spoken about the residents next to Station 3 where Atherton may want to use it for their police officers to be housed, since their previous arrangement was at the park, and they ended up giving that residence to the police chief. There wasn't anything mentioned about that?
No.
Okay. Was there anything mentioned about putting more fire hydrants in the Atherton area?
No, Virginia, perhaps you remember that issue better than me. I think it was almost, I don't recall them articulating any particular problem.
No, because of the relationship that they have with Cal Water too. That, that was something that they would be looking at if it were a problem, because they do work with Cal Water.
Well, just
Have you heard anything else, Rob?
well, first I want to agree wholeheartedly with Robert. When any of these suggestions or these items need to be addressed as a district overall solution, not specifically just for Atherton. It could benefit Atherton, but it also needs to benefit all the other communities we serve. And,
Right.
Some of these are buttonholed for them.
So Rob, the bottom 6 were the ones that I think we should focus on. Those are the ones we took a lot of the more specific ones off the table.
Okay.
Which is why I think we're looking at a more presentation oriented meeting, right? Like an update.
No.
Yes.
Virginia, could you describe the proposal to have some kind of a joint meeting some sort of a joint ad hoc body with 2 members of the community, and I think that's number 1.
Yeah.
On
You
the
mean
list
how
there.
they structure their stuff, Jim?
No, there was a suggestion that the district engage with the town through third parties.
Oh, right. There was a suggestion that a third, like what they would view as a more neutral committee would be engaged, and that there could possibly be old fire board members, some council members, or former council members on there, and this would be independent of the 2 agents. Well, independent of our board and independent of the council. It would almost be like a liaison, or I don't know, almost like a counseling position. And so they had put in there that it would be Steve Nocktime and Bart Spencer, right? And as those were just suggestions, I mean, nothing was set in stone. And then some of the council members, and this was suggested at their council meeting, that former council members like Carrie Wiest would be on this, and so it wouldn't be as biased. Well, our thought going into that meeting, at least Jim and I agreed on this, that we we're the elected representatives. We represent the public. And, you know, we should be talking together face to face instead of this middle person who would try to, I guess, for lack of a better word, make a deal between the fire district and Atherton.
So is it, I mean, I think it's safe to say it was a firm and vehement no.
Yeah, I would,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, for the four of us, not just Jim and me, but I believe that,
I thought it had value to bring that up now in case it is brought up at the meeting, again, just so that we're speaking with one voice.
yeah. I mean, Councilwoman Hawkins Manuelian is here. I don't know if we want her to chime in if she can. I mean, it doesn't matter, but I do know that it was definitely a emphatic no. We did not want that.
Okay.
Right, Jim? I think that's pretty
No,
accurate.
yes, it is. Rob and then Robert.
Yeah, thank you. I just need to, when we're, talking about stats, as Robert brought up, Chief, do we keep separate stats for Station 3 only?
We keep stats for every district that we have. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's how we do it. Remember, when I did that presentation in Atherton to the community right before COVID, every one of the 5 stations that protects Atherton directly, we went through what percentage and what percentage of that area has different communities in it, and pretty much every one of them, with the exception of East Palo Alto, is specific to multiple jurisdictions.
Yes, so we do keep the stats, which we have in the past, for each of the responses from all our stations that actually respond into Atherton, correct?
Correct, yeah.
All right, thank you, Chief. And then finally, Jim, was there anything mentioned about detachment? Are they still interested in it?
No, and again, I'll let Virginia speak to that.
I can answer that. So Rob, I think that it's there's a pretty clear delineation that a couple of council members really don't want that. I'm not sure where the others are. I think 2 of them may still want to explore the option and give this issue to the residents to decide if there's ever, a situation where a referendum is optional. And so I don't think it's completely dead. I think the mayor is kind of in a difficult place. So she's trying to placate all the different viewpoints. But I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but it's not completely off the table from what I can see. But I think it's just coming from, the usual suspects in many ways.
Yeah.
Not that they want to detach, but at least they want to have the residents choose that. So their next phase of dealing with this issue of detachment is a public education initiative. Well, not initiative, well, a public education initiative where they're going to try to do a mailer or answer questions about where their tax dollars are spent or how they're spent. And the fire district was one of the areas. But I think to Councilmember DeGoya said, well, I think no one disputed that how tax dollars are spent is a bad topic, but not just focused on the fire district, but just tax dollars in general. So at least that's where it's kind of been left off at this point.
Yeah.
And did y'all get an email from the city manager today? They sent out something about tax dollars how it's being spent or something like that. I don't know if you're on their email list, but I got something about that today. So I don't know if that's part of their education program, but I think that it's something that the council wants to continue doing in terms of education.
Jim, may I ask one more question?
Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, so we've been going through this. We don't know if we want to detach. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, since 2016. So we're kind of doing that 5-year right turn here. I mean, so, I got to tell you, honestly here, they want to discuss all these issues with us, and yet, they're not really telling us if detachment is off the table or not. And I got to tell you, negotiating in good faith with these people, I have no problem to do that. but I do have a problem negotiating in good faith when they still have detachment on the table, which affects every one of the communities that we serve, Menlo Park, East Palo Alto, the southern part of the county, and the entire county with the emergency response system. It's just like a house of cards. You pull one of the cards out and it makes the whole emergency response system inadequate. So, you know, I got to tell you, I mean, if they'll take detachment off the table, I'll take them seriously. But until they do that, I will not. Thank you, Jim.
All right.
Jim?
Virginia, I think Robert was up next.
Oh, sorry.
Then we'll come back to you.
Two things that I'm confused about. There's this list from Atherton, and I assume that they had gotten together as a body and to say, hey, this is what we want to talk with the fire district. And then my assumption is that Jim, you and Virginia kind of came up with this other grouping or listing to present as some areas. The ideas came from somewhere, from somebody. I didn't put anything down. So it came from somebody, and that's okay. That's not the problem. Hold on, don't jump. That's okay. We have to start from somewhere. And so this is somewhere we start, and then we add to and subtract from. The concern I have is how can we, even if we just say, hey, these are things that we want to talk about, and not address any of the areas that they want to talk about. I don't know how you do that without, because my first meeting I had when before I got elected, we had a meeting over at Atherton, and these issues, some of these same areas came up. It's almost, to me, was like a blindsided. We was going in with one direction, and they was coming at the council members at that time coming from another direction. And that's where this whole detachment thing started kind of flared up a little bit. So my question is, I mean, we can still have that same level of giving presentation, but I think the 8 items that the accident has to me, that has certain costs added to it. One of them doesn't. They just want information, but that information is one of those areas that I was telling you, it concerns me. Why do you want this level of jurisdiction statistic for? You know, and that kind of gets my mind leading into, oh, what's the next question behind that? You know, and how that's gonna be valuable to them. And if we're gonna dance, if we're gonna look for, as they say, the first thing, a method to best establish common ground. So, you know, in terms of what has been said in the past, areas in which we can establish common ground. These are costs associated with us getting to that level of common ground, which gets to the question of, to me, if there's money to be had that they need and they don't have it, they separate. Then now they hopefully can get a lot of money to do these areas, or they can come to the fire district and say, hey, we need some common ground assistance in making this happen. You know, I'm just saying, you know, if we're going to just pick and choose out of the ones from Atherton, or we're going to pick and choose out of the ones that's already listed here, or we're going to have a combination of both. We just need to, and they got to buy into it. Oh, this is going to be our conversation. But I think that the 8 items that they listed are the areas they're concerned about.
Robert?
Virginia, do you want to respond?
Yeah, let me clarify. Robert, so the 8 items that you mentioned are the items they brought up. The 6 items are the ones that we agreed that we would bring back to our board, which is what we're talking about tonight. Okay. And we included Jim, me, Councilwoman Hawkins Manuelian, and Council Member DeGolia. So the 6 that Jim and I thought would be relevant to us are the ones from the bottom one, the 6th, the bottom, from the Menlo Park Fire Protection District. So that's what I think it would possibly be our starting point. Regarding Rob's question and detachment, we couldn't agree with you more, Rob. So I'm not sure what you're talking about in terms of negotiations. We did not talk about negotiating for anything, because For us, it's the same thing. I think everyone on this board agrees that we do not want detachment. And I believe that the council knows our stance too. So I'm not sure where negotiations are even coming from. So I mean, I don't see negotiations in this at all. I think that, at least for me, I wanted, Atherton to get some updates on things that, they might have questions about, like standards of coverage, or, zone haven, that, things that are pretty simple. But we were not, Robert, I'm just saying, we're not talking about the 8 things. We're talking about the 6 things at the bottom.
But
And
see,
those are the 6 things that Jim and I came up with in vis-a-vis, or in tandem with the 2 council members. We can choose to take all these 6 and say, yes, we agree, or take some off, or add some on there. But we're not negotiating anything. To me, this is more informative than anything. I mean, wouldn't you say, Jim?
Yeah, I want to let Robert make his point.
all right, thank you, Jim. I just wanted to, you have to start somewhere. So this is a starting point with this new administration over at Atherton, just like, with us, at the fire district, but it's the same group of folks. All thing I'm saying is that the items that I'm pointing out to you, just those 3 items pointed out to you, smells like last year. It's just coded a different way. And I'm just saying that let's get to the bottom line. And the bottom line is, there are needs over there that Atherton have. And I'm not saying that it's not, that they need some resources to make it happen. Let's cut to the chase and see if that's something we can afford to do, because that's the bottom line. As far as I'm concerned, that's the bottom line. The updates on what we do, they tune in like we tune in to their meetings if they really want an update on any of these areas. There's 6 items that got that they can tune in too. But I thought this was like we had did with Atherton. I mean, with Menlo Park. Chuck went and talked to Drew, and both of them came up with some ideas, and they came up with a list. Here we have 2 separate lists. There's no mind meld of lists here. So if we going into this conversation, everybody's got their own list they're gonna come
No,
from
Robert,
and gonna be speaking from.
that's not true.
I don't see how that's not gonna happen. How does that gonna happen? You mean to tell me you're gonna give them? Let me finish. Just let me finish. We're gonna give them 6 things item. These 6 items or some more items after we finish here. We're gonna say this is what we're gonna talk about, and they're gonna say, okay, well, let's just go with your list instead of our list. I don't think that's gonna happen.
That's the combined list, Robert. That's what I'm saying.
These
The
6
bottom
items here in the
6.
bottom, is it combined with the Atherton list? I don't see it. Show me where they combine. I'm looking at theirs.
These are the things that we came up after we discussed.
I understand that. I'm not that.
No, I know, but I'm just wondering if I'm not clear.
You're not. It's not for me. It's not clear, and I'm gonna back off after say this last thing because I'm not coming through as clear as I could have to get you to understand. What I'm saying is, I understand that you and Jim got together and put together this list as a list to come to the board. I understand that.
No, we didn't. This is not a list that Jim and I put together. This was based off of the Atherton list where the 4 of us talked about it, not just Jim and me. The 4 of us came up with these 6 things.
So Virginia, I'm not sure Robert was finished.
I'm sorry.
I'm done.
Hey, Jim, can I offer a relevant point?
Yeah, Chief.
So when I looked at this, to me, the most important thing on this whole list that rings true for every single jurisdiction that we combine and serve is the standards of cover report, because that's the glue that pulls everything together. The standards of cover wasn't looked at as each individual community. It was looked at us as a fire district and our ability to serve the fire district. So one of the reasons that I sent it out, you can see it has cognizant points on, all the jurisdictions. So whether it be agreeing to primary response routes or looking at the 2nd Battalion or different units to serve different portions of the community and the cause and effect that that helps the entire system is relevant, because no different than what we did to, increase the size, the effective force on the east side of the Highway 101, which required building new facilities, which required new apparatus, which required more personnel. It's the same thing as we talked to Menlo Park, Atherton, the county, specifically, for example, Fire Station 4. That station serves all three of those, right? Moving the truck from Station 1 to Station 4 is an important point, because now there's a truck on the other side of the freeway on the east side. So we've doubled the capacity. The 2nd Battalion allows us to better serve all the jurisdictions, especially now that we're moving to AVL and understanding that one singular battalion chief located 3/4 of a mile from the Palo Alto border on Middlefield Road would never have been adequate to do that, not only from a span of control standpoint, but equally to benefit both in all these jurisdictions as we just run multiple calls at one time or have larger calls. Today, the shooting call in East Palo Alto required that battalion chief to be tied up for an extended period of time. That battalion chief the other day on that structure fire in the morning, where we had 11 people who were burned, 2 that had to be transported, was there in about 3 minutes. So, again, by what we've done, we've created less move-ups. We have resources where they're needed, and that also includes in Atherton. That also includes Menlo Park. I mean, so I think there's a story by handing that, and I was waiting on the Menlo Park, to handing out the standards of cover, those recommendations, and reminding all of you too, a year later, we spent a lot of time in there. That's not only a portion of accreditation, it's how we operate, right? It's how we aspire to be better. It's how we serve the community more effectively. And that's not just the number of units, that's rebuilding facilities, that's moving things. That's a lot of different things that we have to work with each one of these jurisdictions on collectively so that we best serve everybody. And yeah, there's specifics in there, but I think that's probably the most relevant document that you can hand out to any of these jurisdictions. You hand it out in East Palo Alto, you hand it to the county, it's going to have relevance in all of those locales, and probably would be the first thing you want to give to the constituent agencies when we meet, because even a year later, it's as valuable, I think, as it was when it was created.
So, Chuck,
Let me, I want to ask the chief a question, then I have a comment about it. Chief, a minute ago, Rob asked you, maybe 5 minutes ago, Rob asked you about point number 4 down in the lower list, tracking responses by station area.
Yeah.
We know which stations responded, but we don't track where those responses are going. Is that correct?
No, we track by address. We
So-
could track by address.
In other words, if we give Atherton a report that tells them that all of the calls from the Atherton stations are going to Redwood City, is that what they are likely to get from us?
Well, I think there's a relevant discussion in there. I don't know they all go to Redwood City, but
No,
they
but
do
I mean,
want-
if half of them went to Redwood City, say, is that what we would be giving them?
I think as we go further down the road with AVL, there's a risk that there will be, and this is reliability, the term reliability. You want to make sure that unit is where it needs to be when a call comes into your jurisdiction. And I think AVL is going to stress the system in ways that we haven't seen before, because it's no longer an algorithm. It looks for a unit and it finds it. I mean, that includes ladder trucks running medical calls, which is not my preference when an engine company is close by. So we're still sorting the bugs out of it. But I think there's, you raise a good point. I mean, Station 3 can and does spend a considerable amount of time, as does 5 in Redwood City, and they also helping us. So you have to look at that push and pull and what will the effects of that be. And certainly, that 2nd Battalion, moving that truck, all those different things are in play right now because it's real time.
Okay, well, here's my comment. And, I guess we can have this meeting, but boy, I'll tell you, this sounds like this idea of two parties here talking at cross purposes. Atherton is saying, I want to stick my hand in your pocket and pull out some of your money. And we're saying, let me tell you how great I am. And this isn't a conversation. It's just two people having different conversations. And I think Robert's right. I mean, buried in this idea of let's collaborate means let's find ways that we can get your money. And the meeting that we're talking about, I mean, why would I have to come, for example, to the station updates? I mean, the answer to Atherton Council Chambers, can it double as the emergency operation? Of course it can. What's the question? We know it can. Community preparations. Well, that might actually be a discussion, number 3. But tracking responses, we say yes, the end. I don't know what smoke alert is. Standards of cover, we say read the report. I mean, this isn't a meeting to me. This is just us telling them stuff that any one or two of you could go to the meeting and just give them all that stuff. It's not really a finding common ground and having a conversation. So
Yeah.
that's the only purpose of meeting jointly, it seems to me, is to have a conversation. And us telling an update is not a conversation. Them telling us they want money for something is not a conversation.
So Chuck, my point on the SOC was, and I know I gave it to you and Rob in the strategic planning meeting. I sent it to all the board members. It is a document. It's a living document. It's relevant. We updated it, as you know. And I think that's a document you can hand out to Menlo Park, East Palo Alto, the county. And I would propose not treating it any different for each one of those jurisdictions as we set up these meetings. The relevant points might be a little bit different, but at the same time, there's commonality in all the points that are in it to your concern. I think, that's how we were evaluated. That's what we aspire to do. Those were the recommendations that were given to us. And that's the stuff we're working on. And that's district-wide, that serves every resident in the district. I think that's kind of the beauty of it.
Jim?
Virginia?
Yeah, so I just want to address Robert's point. So Robert, these 6 things are not set in stone. These were just what we took away. So that doesn't have to be the starting point. We could come up with something else tonight. That
Virginia,
was,
if my recollection is, the town, presented those 8 issues to us, and then you and I, in consultation with them, pared it down to the 6 that are listed here.
yes,
Does that reflect the process?
yes, but we were going to also bring it back to the board to get their input as well.
Right.
So that's where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, Chuck raises, I understand what Chuck is saying, and Robert as well. Is this really a substantive meeting? I guess I feel it's, we're not going to solve any particular issues at this meeting, right? We'll review these items, discuss them, but I think it's still worth having, if for no other reason than to demonstrate goodwill, demonstrate a willingness to listen. I think that the detachment issue was very divisive, between the two organizations, and if this can help promote communication, goodwill, and cooperation, I think it's worth doing.
I agree. And I think that we have to remember that our audience for this kind of a meeting goes beyond the Atherton Town Council. It goes to the entire town of Atherton and anyone else in the fire district who wants to, who wants to hear this, right? And, like I said before, we also represent the town of Atherton in our board capacity. So I think I agree with you, Jim, with regarding goodwill. I think the Atherton Council would like to hear updates too, but I think it's important for the residents to hear this too. And if the town is going to continue to do their public education pieces, their communication pieces on how their tax dollars are spent, this is an opportunity for us to let our residents know in Atherton that we're doing the job for them and we're doing it well. Jim, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think we're in the same vein there. Robert?
Yeah, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and that sounds great, but you can't discount last year and the attack that the Atherton, and there's no disrespect for them. I hope that if anybody listening, it's not a disrespect. It's just the way it was. The key to it is that if it's all about daisies and roses, then let's give them daisies and roses. And if that's all they want information, let's spend the next 2 hours giving them information. I'm perfectly okay with. I don't have any problem with that. But on a more realistic basis, I think that, and I'm just going to say this: what you do for one city, you decided you want to do for one city, you're going to have to. It's going to be open ears to everybody else, and I think that. And that's okay. If we want to set aside $10 million for cities, hey, let's set us $10 million for cities, and they apply for it and they use it in their city the way they want. Hey, that's okay. Just be real with it, and because all this smoke screen stuff, to me, I mean, and I'm not calling anybody devious, but I don't know. Anyway, that's it.
All right, thank you. Virginia?
Yeah, so Robert, I think I hear what you're saying, and I don't think we're talking about the same thing. And with Rob too, I'm not. I view this as informational only right now, and I mean, I like I said, I think that our stance right now is that as a board, we're not for detachment. I think it's pretty clear, but maybe, I don't know.
That was the
I
first
I
meeting
guess
I
I'm a
went
little
to.
confused because I'm not sure where the $10 million thing is coming from. I'm
Well,
not sure.
you know exactly what I'm talking about, because that I'm just hypothetically putting that out as a
Okay.
probability. But listen to this. Just listen to this. I'm just saying we can go down this road. We can play this go down this road with folks, and we can have the first meeting I went to with Atherton when I got on this board. We went in with the same approach, and they came, and Chief was there. I mean, all the rest of the board members there, except for Jim, they slammed us. That was a tough meeting. I mean, I forgot the lady name, her and this other guy. They came back on us so hard, and that's when they had just got this study together. They came back on us hard on that meeting, and I couldn't figure out where it come from. We all went in there with this presentation to feel good about the meeting. First time meeting in a while. I understand that. But then it came with this. So maybe the group that's on Atherton board is beyond that. They don't want detachment. It's still circling some other folks. That's fine. But let's just call it where if it's there, people gotta, we can't go in there with, I don't go in there naive is what I'm saying. Giving presentation is great. I think it's having tea together is fine. I don't have no problem. But the meeting I first went to into Atherton like that was set up that way, but it came out, the hammer came out later in the meeting. And it got, to me, I thought it was an ugly meeting, but it was just me. And it just got worse after that.
Right.
So I'm done.
Well, I think I'm not sure there's any real disagreements among us right now that the approach will be we'll make our presentations, we'll let them know all the the valuable services we provide for the community and how we provide them, and respond to any questions that they might have. But I think there's less substance to this one than there is the Menlo Park meeting, and I think that's okay for the reasons I stated. So Virginia?
Yeah, so looking at our list, I mean, I'm not opposed to taking some of these things off, like the Atherton Council Chambers doubling as an EOC or something, where there might be someone who construes that they want money from the fire district. So I'm just saying these are the things we're bringing back. So let's, if we want to talk about what we want on our end for the joint meeting agenda, why don't we pare it down or add or whatever to the 6? Because I'm not, unless we all agree on that, or yeah, I don't know. I just haven't had it. I don't have a sense of what, if there's a consensus on the 6. So maybe that's what we talk about. What do we want on there from these 6 items, or do we want other things on there
Okay.
as well?
Chuck?
And some,
Well, I would say if we're going to add things, I would add the 2 things that we're talking to Menlo Park about. One is the emergency services situation, and actually that's the only one. And part of that is the LRAD system. But yeah, so just that one topic. Sorry, not buying the property. But if we were going to add anything, that's the one that I would add, and I think that's where they're getting potentially real value. And I've said it before, I certainly would be willing to pay 100% of the LRAD system to get it installed everywhere. That's, I mean, that serves the fire district, it serves Atherton, and it's not Atherton's money. And that's an area where I think they could get something from
Okay,
us.
so let's expand number 3. But let's go down the list if we could. If we want to pare it down, we will. Fire station updates, yeah, I think that stays. Atherton Council Chambers, you know, I don't hear any real support for that one. That can come off. 3, the community preparedness update. I think that could be expanded to include, you know, Chuck's
LRAD.
topic there. Tracking responses by station areas. You know, we can simply describe, hey, this is what we do and how we do it. You know, I think a presentation from Zone Haven would be welcomed. I think the smoke alert. I'm not sure that that almost seems like an air quality issue that I'm not sure we're equipped to address.
What is it?
Harold?
What does it mean?
You know, I
that's
think
the
there was
Bay
concern
Area Air
about
Quality Management does that. But they did talk, we did talk with the council member about having a sensing station. If they ever redid their communications pole there, they could put various things like an LRAD on it. And by the way, the LRAD, or the potential to have an LRAD where we already have a device that needs to be replaced, is at the Walsh Road Cal Water location. That does need to get upgraded. So there's one of your easy ones right there.
And then number 6, you know, providing a SOC update. So I think we took number 2 off, and then kind of
And added, we're adding, what was the one you suggested, Chuck?
The LRAD and the emergency.
Like,
yeah, I would
communications.
expand number 3 to include that.
okay, so basically 5 items with the expansion of 3 community preparedness update.
Right.
Robert, are you okay with that? I mean, just
Whatever, I mean, it's, you know, you don't, yeah, okay, let's just.
All right. Rob, did you have your hand up?
No, Jim, thanks.
Okay. Well, I think we have a consensus on those items. So we have a tentative date for the Atherton meeting of April 12th. Or we'll propose that to them. And then
And Jim, I looked at it, he said the week of April 12th. So I stand corrected. I guess it's
Okay.
a Monday. So anytime that week, we can poll the board and see which days work for you, and then, you know, figure out whether they can meet as well.
And then the Menlo Park meeting?
Menlo Park meeting set for next week.
Okay.
Can you tell us the exact details of that meeting? Is that on the 16th at 5 to 7?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, that pushes closed session to the end of the regular board meeting. So just FYI.
All right.
Could be a
All right.
long night.
It will be. All right. Well, hey, I think unless anyone has anything to add, I think we've pretty well run this one to ground.
Well, I'll
So,
make a motion to adjourn, or do we need?
Good job, Jim.
all right. Second for adjournment.
I'll second.
Second,
All right. Moved and seconded to adjourn. Michelle, would you call the roll?
Yes, Director Bernstein, was that you who seconded? I thought I heard two
Yes,
people.
yeah,
Okay,
you put
thank you.
Chuck in for a second.
Thank you. Director Crowley,
Aye.
Director Jones,
aye.
Director Solano,
I.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin.
Aye. All right. All right, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.